All right, this is Jimmy Cab, Tape to Broadcast, 5150 interview series. We're here in Glendale at the complex with Chip from The Body.
Yeah, what's up?
One of the things that I've always liked about The Body, aside from you guys being crushing and devastating, is the fact that you guys are just really normal dudes. You played two shows today. You
Yeah.
played earlier. Tell me a little bit about the earlier show.
I was at a small warehouse space over in Mid City. I think Mid City. It was awesome. It was a little DIY spot. Bunch of people came out. It was great.
When you play these DIY spots, this is what's very interesting about your band. You guys tour extensively. You guys are hardworking motherfuckers, man. You guys do it DIY style, and the shows that you play, they're so versatile. It could be with hardcore bands, it could be with heavy doom bands. Talk to me a little bit about that punk ethic. Where do you get that from?
That's what we grew up with, kind of Arkansas in the '90s. There was a big independent music scene, a lot of punks. Also, like the metal scene that kind of grew up out of there with like Wake and Deadbird and stuff. Those guys are all still doing stuff, and it was really based a lot on. Everyone was just like, there's nothing getting done for us, so we got to go out and do it, And I mean, it's gone through its phases many times. Like, we're like, oh, like everyone's grown up, we're moving out, and then like the next crew will come in and like rule it, and like it's still like the dudes, like the guys from Wake and like the Downtown Records crew down there, still keeping it going. It's awesome. Like CT from Wake is booking almost all the shows in Little Rock right now. And you're just like, hey, I've known you since you were, like 16 years old, and you're just a little shit dog metal kid from North Little Rock, and it's awesome that, it's like, oh yeah, you're still got everything under control, and it's amazing. You still see all those people out at shows, and everyone's around, and I think that's kind of where that's where we came from. So it's kind of, it's an easy way to do things. You keep stuff under control as much as possible, and you're not like left guessing about like, oh, am I gonna get $10 tonight, or am I gonna get a couple $100? And so it's easier when you kind of have a grasp on stuff. It's a little easier.
What did you say that, especially now in 2015, having that DIY mentality and the spirit of doing it on your own really benefits you musically? Because you're not being hounded by like labels who are telling you, hey, you got to change this fucking song. And you have the freedom to play, which is another thing I want to talk about. The freedom that you guys do. You guys never get the credit for being so musically adventurous in this heavy genre. You've expanded the realms beyond with the collaborations that you've done. Do you find that doing it DIY helps you and encourages you to just basically do whatever you want and not have to worry about a backlash?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah, it's also, we've been a band for so long now. It's not like if someone wants to work with us, it's not like it's not known that we're pretty much like set in when we want to do something, we're going to do it. And I think anyone that works with us and anyone that we've had the privilege of working with, everyone's been super psyched on what we're bringing. And I don't know, because I feel like, and I think we said this last time, like I think a lot of times like heavy music gets really stagnant, and it gets into like these zones where it's like, oh, I'm just gonna play these riffs over and over, and yeah, and like you're like 10 generations down, and you're like, wow, you're still doing that. And to me, it's boring. Other people, like, because you get new people coming in, they're excited about everything, and so like, certain like aspects of music, certain like genres and subgenres are like, they're exciting to a lot of people, but like for people that have been involved a long time, it's like, well, I heard that fucking 10 years ago, and it's amazing like what comes out of it in terms of like, oh, like, it's something like with Full of Hell, who we're touring with right now, like it's kind of like beyond, like there's elements of so much different stuff, and I feel like in a way that's why I think we're touring together has been great, is because I think we kind of like try to like put in other things, like a lot of like electronic stuff, like, and we're getting that way with playing live. It's a little harder to bring in different elements being a two-piece, like bringing in like a lot of the electronic stuff, but it's kind of getting easier as we like kind of develop and find ways to do things. But like with those guys, it's like, oh yeah, we got like elements of like grindcore and like noise and like experimental stuff, and also like into other stuff like sludgy stuff and doom and heaviness, and it's just like, there's so many like avenues that are open, and I think like it's nice to see when people start opening those doors. And I think that's all we want to do because, I mean, after touring like pretty steady for 15 years, it's kind of like, man, I've seen a lot of bands and I like it when someone surprises me or like, I mean, I don't know. I like to describe it a lot as like, I kind of like it when stuff sounds like crap. And that's because people will be like, what the hell are they doing? And I'm like, they're doing something awesome. Like, and it's kind of funny, you know, but I just kind of like to see people push it. And sometimes people push it in a bad way, but I still think that's enjoyable to me.
It's rock and roll, man. It all comes down to rock and roll.
It's all adaptation. I mean, it's always has been. I was thinking about that today, like driving. I was like, you know, like Lee was playing something on the stereo, and it was like an old, like African synth guy. He's like playing. So it was like a mix of like kind of African, like African funk, like saxophone and traditional instrumentation. But at the same time, it was also like, oh shit, like this guy's like messing around with synths. And I was kind of like, if this was someone now making this, I'd probably be annoyed. But the fact that this guy was in the 70s just making this racket that was kind of like, all right, like it had aspects of like Fela Kuti or something, but like with just like insane like synthesizer over it. And I was just like, this is awesome, you know? And so it's just cool to see like when people just start adapting tools that they learn about into what they're already doing. And you're like, oh, cool. Like, which is, I don't know, it rules.
Do you find yourself being this experimental live? Because here's another thing that's interesting about the body. Every time I talk to people, there's no clear-cut classification. And if they do try to classify the body, then you could either tell that they're just, I don't want to say ignorant to your whole discography, but they're only familiar with a certain album, and they're not familiar with the whole experimentation. But live, do you find yourself ever curious to bring that element into the live show?
As in, like the more experimental side, I think we're always trying to, and I mean, I think it's been a little difficult since, you know, I mainly have played guitar forever, and now I like play guitar and I do the stuff like with the loops and the sound layering and stuff, and Lee's doing the samples, and like he's now got the triggered bass drum and not even playing like a real bass drum. So it's kind of like we're trying to work those aspects in, and it's difficult as only being two people, I think, because, you know, there's like, if I'm playing guitar, I can't like play a synthesizer, or like, you know, like I can run a loop, but I'm kind of limited in what I have. So as I expand kind of like what we're working with, like equipment wise, like I think it'll actually start working a little better, I hope. But also, I mean, we do what we can now, but I still think we're pretty like rooted in like at the moment like how we've been playing for the last couple of years, because it's like the next thing we have to do is like take a bigger loop into like different kinds of equipment or like PA, and so it's kind of funny. But I mean, yeah, I think we try to do as much as we can, and I think like we're talking about trying to play some of the songs we recorded on like Christ Redeemers and stuff, which when we recorded them, it was like the guitar was like a minor element, but I haven't been able to do that live because of limitations of equipment. But it's getting to the point where we're talking about, oh yeah, now we can do that. And so once we get back home, I think we're going to start working more on like trying to be able to play some more of the stuff that we've never been able to do. So I don't know, it's exciting.
Let me mention one thing real quick here that, again, I need to reinforce about the body. They do it DIY. It wasn't that long ago that you were scheduled here in LA, and unfortunately something happened to your van. Right?
Yeah, we had
You
just...
guys ain't touring in a nice luxury tour bus.
We kind of are now. We got the one from Indiegogo, but it didn't work. Like we had just gotten back, and no, not like a tour bus, but like a nice van. We just got the van, and somehow our mechanic neglected to let us know that when they said it was all good, it wasn't all good. So we went out of town, and we left Portland to do a two-piece fest in San Francisco, and then play the show down here. And we get about an hour out of town, and the van just dies at speed on the highway. And so we're like, okay, we pull over, and we're like, okay, what the hell? And we check it out, and we're like, okay, what's happening? It starts back up a few minutes later, so we're like, oh, well, maybe it's a fluke, you know, it hasn't run. It's been sitting over the winter for the most part with only minor driving. So maybe it's, you know, working out some kinks. So we start again. We get about another 30 to 40 minutes down the highway, and it does the same thing again. And I was like, if we were in traffic it just shut down. Like at 70 miles an hour, you know, we're just like, oh, it's the van doesn't work now. So
By the way, I don't mean to be laughing at you.
oh yeah,
I'm laughing at the fact that there's musicians now that they cry about their rider. All right, they get to the place and they get off their luxury fucking tour bus and they're bitching because you know they don't have fucking chips.
well, if I don't have, you know, Kalamata olives with garlic in it, I'm not playing. Go to fucking Whole Foods.